everyone. This is Professor Jeff Wilkerson at Luther College, talking to you once more about what to look for in the night sky. This week, we're going to be talking about the week of April 19th, 2021. And if you go back and look at what we talked about last week, go ahead. You always want to go back and relook at all of them every time because, well, it's such a dramatic, ongoing series left with a cliffhanger in every episode. How can you not go back to look for those little details you might have missed? You know, last week we talked about how we usually like to discuss things that you can watch for several weeks unfold, and you can look at how the night sky is changing. And we're saying, yeah, this is a great week to be looking for this thing, but you can see it for the next 2 months or 3 months or more or something like that. And certainly the last few weeks have been like that. This week is not. The other thing you know, if you've watched this series of videos regularly, and again, I don't know how you cannot have, I like to talk about things that everybody else isn't talking about typically. But that's, again, not the case this week. There's been a couple other times where I've referenced that and said, you know, we're going to talk about things other people are talking about, and we're going to do that again this week. When I recommend for the week of April 19th, you be paying attention to the Lyrid meteor shower. And so we've talked about meteor showers. I believe it was the Geminids in December was the last time we talked about meteors, the only time we talked about meteors. And this shower isn't anywhere nearly. And when we get Geminid time, you keep watching this series of videos until next December, and I'll talk about the Geminids again, because when we get Geminid time, I can't help but talk about them. It's my favorite meteor shower, big, bright meteors. The Lyrids is not that. The Lyrids is significantly less dramatic, but interesting nonetheless. It gives us something a little bit different to talk about from what we normally talk about in the night sky. And meteor showers, we talked about this before, but we want to make sure this is clear. So we've got the sun here, and as we orbit the sun, so that's the Earth in orbit around the sun. Comets also orbit the sun, and comets orbit the sun in what we call highly eccentric orbits. So they'll come in with these big smashed ellipses. Ours is almost a circle. Now, depending on the orientation of that ellipse, there's a chance that the comet's orbit would cross the Earth's orbit. And if it does, then the debris, when a comet gets close to the sun, what a comet is doing, so here's the sun up close now. And as the comet gets in close to the sun, there's the nucleus of the comet. It starts boiling material off. The sun heats it up. Most of the time, the comet's out far from the sun, and it's frozen, and it's a little block of ice, water ice, and dry ice, frozen carbon dioxide, and methane ice, and who knows what other ice, and grit and dirt that's in there. But it starts boiling that off. And there's two possible tails that come up from the comet, and one of those is a dust tail. And the dust is solid material, it's heavy material. And so if the comet's orbiting around this way, the dust tends to fall back in a curved path toward the orbit of the comet. And so that's the grit from the comet. Now, there's also an ion tail, a gas tail, and that gets blown from the solar wind. That gets blown straight away from the sun like that. And so you see this nice straight. This is typically blue from fluorescence, from the gas glowing, and this is typically white from reflected light from the sun. You're seeing the spectrum of the sun reflected in those dust particles, those grains of grit. That's what we'll call this episode, Grains of Grit. You can imagine with an episode named like Grains of Grit what the cliffhanger will be for next time. It's good that you can imagine it because I don't know what it's going to be. Anyway, as this stuff curls back, it falls into orbit around the sun. So the comet's orbiting the sun. The dust that it's boiled off is orbiting the sun as well. We will then hit that. If it crosses our orbit right there, we'll hit that dust. And we'll see a whole bunch of meteors from just small little grains. Unlikely that any of this stuff would ever make it to the ground to become meteorites, because it's little grains of stuff that comes flying into the atmosphere. And because it's that point in our orbit, we hit at the same time every year. Bam, 1 year later, bam, 1 year later, bam. And that's where we are with the Lyrids this week. And the Lyrids, the meteors are named for their parent constellation from where it looks like they're coming. So as we hit this spot, all of the meteors will hit the Earth's atmosphere. So here's the Earth now, and there's the Earth's atmosphere. The meteors will hit the Earth's atmosphere and burn up, you know, and they all look like they're coming from the same point, even though they might come in different directions. And so we see them hitting the atmosphere and burning up as we drive into them. They all look like they're coming from that point we're moving into. And so we look at them on the sky, and here's the spot on the sky. They all trace back to that same spot on the sky, right? You'll see them, but they don't have to be at that spot. You might not see them until down here. You might not see it until over here, even though the spot in the sky is here. What you know is if you don't see it till over here, it traces back to that point where it came. So you might see one that's way down here and it traces back up here. And the constellation that it traces back to, that's the name for the meteor shower, these annual meteor showers we have. And so the Lyrids is this week. And if you've been paying attention, and again, I know you have, you've been paying attention to everything we've been saying in these videos. We've been looking at the summer triangle in the morning sky. We started quite a while ago looking at the summer triangle in the morning sky. And that summer triangle contains the bright star Vega. And the bright star Vega is in the constellation Lyra. So that's the parent constellation for this week's meteor shower coming up. And so we were looking at it early in the morning and way back in February, saying, wow, look at the glow of that thing. Look at that thing in the glow of the sun. It's a great thing to look at in the morning sky as the summer triangle gets higher in the sky. Now, here we are 2 months later. We may have been looking at January already, at the end of January. So we're 2 to 3 months later here as we're moving along. And that means it's rising 4 or 5 hours earlier. And by midnight, it's well placed in the sky. And probably by 11 o'clock or even 10 o'clock, you can start to see it in the sky. So by 11 o'clock or 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, midnight, you can start to see the summer triangle rise. Now, you don't actually need the radiant, as it's called. You don't need the spot that these meteors track back to be in the sky to see some of the meteors. Because, again, this meteor was well away. That could have been below the horizon, and you saw that meteor streaking away from it. But you'll see more of them, and they'll be better if the radiant's higher in the sky. So if you wait until midnight, 1 or 2 in the morning, the radiant will climb into the sky pretty high, and you should be able to see this. Now, the hourly rate, we talk about the zenith hourly rate for these meteor showers, and the hourly rate for the Lyrids will probably be about 15 to 20, which isn't an enormous number, but it's a decent number, and you'll recognize. So these are meteor showers come from the grit left over from comets that we're talking about, but you can see other meteors every night you go out. Every night you go out and you look up, if you just pay attention and you watch, you're going to see, depending on how dark your skies are, you're going to see anywhere from a few meteors to 5 or 10 meteors, maybe even more some nights per hour. So you're going to see 5 or 10, but those come from all directions. They don't look like they're coming from one spot in the sky, and this will probably be 3, 4 times as much as what you would normally see added to that other number. And so you will notice, if you pay attention, you will notice the added number of meteors that you're seeing, and you will notice that they're all coming from the direction of Lyra. Those other meteors, the random meteors that we call them, that's just leftover debris from the formation of the solar system or stuff that's been knocked off of planets or moons or something. An asteroid, a rock comes in and hits the surface of Mars and blasts stuff up, or hits the surface of the moon and blasts stuff up, and you got grit there. But there's a lot of grit that's just kicking around from the time the solar system formed. The solar system formed, and you had all of the heavy stuff coalescing to form the terrestrial planets, the inner planets and their moons, and there's some of that debris that's still circulating around out there, and we run into it on a regular basis. We actually run into a lot of stuff every night and scoop that up. Most of it's so small you don't see it as meteors, but you will see some of that as random meteors. But we're talking about the Lyrid meteor shower. The Lyrids out here in the constellation Lyra with the bright star Vega. That you can identify right there. So this is what we're talking about here. We run through it now. The thing for us is that, well, a thing for us, there's a lot of things for us, but one of the things we want to think about here right now is that when we run into this, think of this as a tube of material that the comet is leaving behind. So the comet leaves this sort of tube of material, and we splash into it. And that tube can be broad, and it can be dense, so we have a lot of meteors, or there can be dense pockets and not dense pockets. We can just graze that tube of material. We can plow right through the middle of it. There's lots of different possibilities for when we hit this. And the thing about the Lyrids is that they tend to stretch out, that we tend to hit this in such a way that it stretches out over a long time. And so you could actually, as soon as you see this, you can go out and start recognizing that there is an increase in meteors coming from the direction of Lyra and the Lyrids. That number, that peak number of 15 to 20 per hour that you'll be able to see. What is that? Every 3 or 4 minutes you'd expect to see one. So if you can go out for half an hour, you're probably going to see 5 or 10 of these. You probably have a pretty good chance of seeing a good number of these. But that peak is going to occur somewhere on the night of, let's say, the 20th, the 21st, and the 22nd of April, anywhere across a broad peak. The very, very peak of it probably would be on the night of the 21st, about midnight, where 21 turns into 22, or early in the morning of the 22nd. And so you'll have this big, broad peak, though, so you can go out all week and watch for this meteor shower, and you can go out next week and watch for the meteor shower. Okay, I lied. I said it was focused on this week. You do get a little bit of next week. I bet if you're out on the 26th and the 27th, you would be able to see an increase in number of meteors. The problem with the 26th and the 27th is the moon's going to be full, and it's going to be big and bright. It's going to be washing out the sky. In fact, that's the problem with this week, is the moon's going to get more full as you go from the 19th through the 26th. The moon's filling out and getting closer and closer to our radiant over here, so it's getting harder to see these meteors. So I recommend going out a little bit earlier. The night of the 20th might be the very best night to do this, but even the night of the 19th is a good night to go out and look for these meteors. Go out the 19th, the 20th, and the 21st. The moon's getting brighter, washing out the fainter meteors, making them harder to see, but you should be able to see them all week. You should have a pretty good look at these Lyrid meteors during the week of April 19th, 2021. Go out and take a look. I hope everybody has clear skies. I know I haven't. I don't know what the skies have been like where you are, but where I am, I feel like I haven't seen the night sky in 3 weeks, and it's actually getting pretty close to that. That's how cloudy it's been. I haven't gotten much rain out of it. We could use a little bit of the rain, but we're not getting that. We're just getting lots of heavy, low clouds and making it difficult to see much of anything in the night sky. Maybe it gets clearer next week. Hopefully it's clearer where you are. Take a look, everybody. Enjoy the Lyrid meteor showers, and we'll have something new and different for you next week. Thanks.